Obligations. A story by user HexKm.
The Terran colony is currently defenseless, O High One.
The Jaxorian Commandant's jewels glistened on his carapace as he looked towards the prize that the three-dimensional fluid display produced. A star system with only 3 rotating planets rose from the liquid well. The central of these that showed bright patches was the only one worth looking at, as the others contained no surface water. The Commandant reached out a claw and adjusted the view such that all but the central planet was visible, and it drew more fluid from the well as it grew in size, the bright patches rendering topographical depth contours. Around the planet was a large satellite, far too small to be a moon, but with the wrong shape and at a distance that made it unlikely to be a Terran transit station.
And what is this thing orbiting the prize?
The Jaxorian gestured with a pincer towards the satellite's fluid bubble image.
It's a repository of relics, High One. The Terrans name it a museum.
Kathy Davis raced through the doorway and smacked her hand down on the green flashing button, silencing the annoying announcement of the incoming comm message. Across the office from the desk with the control console, a holovid screen flared into existence, showing the scintillating colors of a bejeweled Jaxorian, which the Terrans colloquially called crabbies.
Oh, freak me, Kathy muttered under her breath.
A modulated voice came across the channel, and the Jaxorian moved as the words came, making it obvious that it was the one communicating.
Terrans who have illegally colonized the second planet of the HexKm system prepare to be incarcerated. The Jaxorian element of the Draslite Empire has a hereditary claim of all HexKm space, and you are in territorial violation. Arrange your populations near your starship landing areas for processing, and damaged individuals will be minimized. Terminate communication.
The screen's luminous projection dissipated, leaving Kathy's mouth hanging open. Jaxorians were known throughout the known galaxy for consuming their own dead, but moreover for consuming prisoners, alive. And the population of the lush farming world the museum orbited wasn't prepared to fend off an invasion. All those people would likely be no more than food if they gave in. New India had been colonized more than a century and a half ago, well after the war had settled the borders and all the claims. And the HexKm system was firmly in coalition space. Kathy had no idea how such a claim could be made by the Crabbies, but she sure didn't see any validity to it. She pulled up a keyboard and tried to get a message out to Central, but it looked like everything but subspace comms were blocked. She let out a quiet, steady stream of curses as she frantically composed a message, and sent it off with all the priority flags she could manage. It wasn't like she expected much help immediately. This far inside of Coalition space, there were hardly any patrol ships, and the only ships in the system were a couple of cargo ships down on the planet, a really vulnerable place to be with an enemy force bearing down on them. Kathy knew she was going to have to do something herself. Well, not herself, but she would be the one who would have to set it in motion. Kathy pushed up from the desk and walked out into the corridor. This had to be done in person. It was so unfair. It was a long trip. The museum was a warren of corridors, lift junctions, ladders, and access crawl spaces. Kathy ran her hand along a bulkhead here, a railing there, lingering on the handle of a hatch as she made her way deeper and deeper into the construction. She pulled away a barrier rope that designated an area that was off limits to the infrequent visitors who came to experience the remaining documentation, an example of those who had fought and struggled and tamed this area of space. Once, there had been a whole team of curators, but now she was the only one. A lighthouse keeper in an age of GPS guidance. Carefully, almost reverently, Kathy walked down the corridor, as if she wanted to minimize the damage her footsteps were doing to the silence. As she reached the dogged hatch at the end of the corridor, she raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. It was so unfair. Kathy took a couple of deep, calming breaths, then knocked on the dogged hatch, producing a deep, echoing sound. "Come," the voice intoned from the other side of the hatch, and the locks released as the wheel in the center of the door spun by itself. After the wheel came to a stop, Kathy gently pushed on the door, and after some more pressure it gave way and swung inward. Kathy stepped over the lip of the hatch and entered the circular room beyond. In the very center of the room, a metal cylinder spanned from floor to ceiling. It swiveled so that the red glow of the one singular circular optical sensor faced the woman, who now respectfully closed the hatch behind her. Miss Davis, to what do I owe a personal visit? I expect that you will do no better at chess than if you had stayed in the comfort of your office. The voice was deep and rich, but without dialect, without feeling, precise. Kathy turned to face the cylinder and shook her head. It was so unfair. No, sir. I wish it were such a trivial problem as my terrible gambits. She swallowed, then continued. Sir, it's Jaxorians. They are demanding the surrender of New India, and there are no coalition forces in any proximity to help. It's... Kathy's voice choked off. It was supposed to be retired, free from this sort of thing. It's up to me, the voice finished, the glow of the optical sensor darkening. Yes, sir. Kathy swallowed again. What do we do? Miss Davis, you and I both know what we do. The voice was again matter-of-fact, precise. We fulfill our destiny. The voice paused. Reconnect me. The sleek fin Jaxorian battlecruiser moved inexorably closer to the orbit of the central planet. Surrounded by a dozen smaller support and assault landing craft, it was the only vessel within the range of the long-range scans. It would be several standard day cycles before any coalition vessels could be there, which would be more than enough time. The Commandant felt the warmth of excitement rush through his body. An alert sounded, a weapons lock. Defenses up! The Commandant spun to look at his subordinates. What targets us? The museum, oh High One. Many weapon signatures are powering. Kathy knelt at the open access panel, silent tears running down her cheeks, as she plugged the last of the connections together. As she finished, she moved slowly, almost reluctantly, to lift the cover. Does all seem okay, sir? Some of the systems seem deficient, but that does not seem to be related to your work. All the connections give satisfactory diagnostics. The voice was calm. I have the enemy group identified. Unfortunately, many of the weapon systems are not responding. Kathy carefully replaced the panel's cover, running her hand along the edges, making sure it was back in place correctly. She got to her feet and walked toward the cylinder, the optical sensor no longer just red, but now multicolored. A shifting pattern that cast a seemingly tie-dyed pattern on her face. Command chose to remove several weapon systems. They left mostly those considered obsolete or too expensive to remove. I'm so sorry, sir. It was not your doing, Miss Davis. I do, however, regret that you may become a casualty, as I do what I must. It was so unfair. Tears flowed freely as Kathy looked into the rapidly changing multicolor light that was becoming brighter and brighter. I understand, sir. Please advise me if there is anything else I can do to assist you. She sniffled and smiled, straightening a little. I was charged with caring for your needs. Ever has it been so. Humans serve the gods, and the gods protect the humans. We fulfill our obligations. The light from the cylinder was pure yellow-white, the color of soul. Those who disturb my children will be destroyed. The calm, precise voice was broadcast across all the communications channels, using the broadcasting power of stations before the hyperfocal beams made them overkill. The effect at close range, say within a star system, was to cause resonance within all but the most well-shielded comm systems. All around the planet, the words were heard. On the Jaxorian ships, personal comm devices blared the words, though only those with active translator units could understand them. But the unbidden words rattled those that heard them resound from everywhere around their ships. Terran Astro-Military Orbital Defense Station Horus, decommissioned, came back to life, its targets well within range. Pulse lasers disabled engines and pierced airtight cabins in the smaller ships. A few larger projectile railguns sent construction girder-sized missiles into the superstructure of the battlecruiser. Return fire of plasma and coherent light melted the outer skin of the station, which slowly rotated, putting fresh metal out to take the damage. The battlecruiser charged the station, its main batteries gouging deep furrows in the station. The smaller ships of the enemy group followed behind the bigger ship, some maneuvering directly behind it, as if hoping to use it for cover. The station sent a few more of the missiles into the large ship, and finally rotated on its other axis, bringing its nominal south pole to face the enemies. Within the center of the station, there was an explosion. From the polar region burst forth the force of a star, its blast washing over the battlecruiser and along its sleek body to the smaller ships beyond. Fins melted in the blue-white heat. Metal skin and armor plates peeled away as misshapen molten blobs. The blast continued, and the Jaxorian ships melted away like a block of ice facing a plasma cutter. Within 10 seconds, the blast was dying away, but the effect was dramatic. Of the Jaxorian group, only one supply ship was still intact, but not unharmed. As its captain assessed the situation, it turned about and headed back the way it had come, making about a quarter of its normal speed. The station drifted quietly. Its usual navigation marker lights were dark, but cooling molten metal in dozens of places marked its location in the dark of space. It was now just another piece of debris in the aftermath of a battle. The orbital defense project that the Terran astromilitary developed was short-lived due to the cost, and once the Terrans had joined the coalition of worlds, it was argued that they were no longer necessary. The one development that had been perhaps the most controversial was that of the God AI. These AI were conditioned to be the ultimate protectors, with the understanding that they would make the protection of Terrans their primary directive. Of course, some of these AI had developed complexes and demanded tribute from the worlds they protected. Others became paranoid, given the inability they felt witnessing plagues and famines that they were unable to stop. The Horus Museum was one of the few remaining stations, and it was preserved as a public museum and military research facility for the long-term study of dedicated military AI. The retrieved logs of the recent altercation with the Jaxorians in the Exilian system only reinforced what the decades of research had postulated. The Horus AI, an almost unbeaten tactical expert in simulation, recognized the only way that a relatively immobile, nearly unarmed station could have stopped the enemy force was through self-sacrifice, through detonating its remaining reactor cores. TA Sky Marshal Kinsey has awarded Horus the Terran Cluster, posthumously, and its core now rests in a pyramidal memorial constructed by the citizens of New India. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Check out the description for the story, and join the Discord if you like. Consider supporting the channel and the author as well. It's a dangerous world out there, but remember to be brave and look up to seek the stars.